You learn a lot about God when you study His interaction with man throughout history. And when you consider man, His greatest and His most beloved creation, man who was last in creation, but first in interaction with God. And the way this man first encountered God is by the voice of God. When you study Genesis, it always says, the voice of God walked in the garden in the cool of the day. Now, the voice of a person, is very unique. When you consider the tone or the accent that they speak in, the way they pronounce vowels or certain words, or even the way they pronounce your name. You know the identity of a person when you hear their voice. So you can be in a crowded room full of strangers, but the second you hear the voice of someone that you know, you're able to instantly recognize them. Now, Jesus used an example in John 10 to teach us how we can hear His voice. He said that His sheep hear His voice and they follow Him. Now, shepherds mainly lead their sheep by their voice, and sheep tend to spend a lot of time with their shepherd to a point that they are able to recognize the voice of the shepherd really well and are able to distinguish the voice of the shepherd from any other stranger. Now, this is the way that we must get to know the Lord as our shepherd, to a point that we're able to distinguish His voice from any other voice. The way this is done is by consciously being with Him and spending time with Him. Now, what we must consider in what Jesus is telling us is the sheep hears His voice, meaning the sheep doesn't do all the talking. So when we are alone with Him, it won't do us any good that at the moments we set up our time to seek Him, we do all the talking and we rarely spend time to hear what He says. Our fellowship with God is pointless if we rarely take time to pause to hear His voice or to know His will in a particular situation. It says in Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1 and 2, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they were doing evil. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. So we are told to guard our steps, meaning we need to have a careful approach when we go to the presence of God. And when we go to His presence, it is wisdom that we take time to listen and not let our words be rash before God. Now, how foolish would it be to have an audience with the King of Kings and do all the talking? We must have enough respect for Him in the way we approach Him and in the words we use to address Him. Only a fool will utter worthless things in the presence of the King of Kings and not be conscious of who is standing before him or the way to approach royalty. When you want to hear the voice of God, the words that you use before you approach His throne matters. And the reverence you give to the King of all kings, when you take time to hear Him, the way you are postured before Him matters as well. Jesus has made the way for us to boldly approach His throne, and we are told to bring our petitions before Him and to pray according His will. Now, we will not know how to pray according to His will if we do not know His ways or what is on His mind. Now, to know what is on His mind, we need to hear His voice. Then we will know what is on His mind, and then we will be able to pray and ask anything in accordance to His will. Now, as much as our God is a Father, He is a King. And we must approach Him knowing that He is the King of Kings, that He is our God who is in heaven and we are on earth. We cannot be rash in what we speak before a king, and we cannot speak worthless things before Him. There is no place for temper tantrums or pity parties before the King of all kings. We consciously draw near to listen. And once we come before His throne, we bow down and posture ourselves before the King of Kings as He opens His mouth to utter His words. I pray that as you understand this, the way you approach our God, the way you approach our King of Kings would drastically shift. And that in your time in His presence, you would consciously take time to seek His voice. Our God is a God who speaks, and may you live on every word that proceeds out of His mouth. God bless you.